Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Teaching Literacy and Exploration in Middle School ELA. My name is Elisa Osorio, and I'm an Associate Product Marketing Manager for our middle school product, Amplify ELA. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we'll email out the recording link for you to rewatch as you'd like. If you want to access the captions, you can click on the live transcript button in the bottom tray. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box or in the chat, and we'll try to get to them throughout the presentation or at the end. We also welcome comments in the chat. And to start us off, let's find out where everyone is joining us from today and what your role is in education. Just a quick note too, that we have more webinars scheduled for this series. So if you haven't already signed up, please do. Our last session in this series will be teaching research skills in middle school ELA classroom, and that will be on Thursday, March 24th at 3 p.m. Eastern. Once again, thank you so much for being here, and it is my honor to introduce the wonderful Kamilah Simpson, who is a senior product specialist here at Amplify and our host for this afternoon.
Hello, everyone. It's so exciting to see all of you are here for where everyone is from. If you were able to join us last week, we had an amazing time really thinking about how to prepare our middle schoolers for high school. I see we have reading specialists. Those of you who are from Jersey, the Boston area, Michigan, South Carolina, Milwaukee, Wyoming. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so excited that you are here, and this is going to be an interactive time together. Also, I see Ohio Director of Student Achievement and Partners are here, so welcome, welcome everyone. During our time today, we're really going to dive into some of those Amplify ELA applications that some of you may have been using, others you may not know that they're there. So I'm going to get to share and show with you a few golden nuggets, I like to call them, from time to time that live in the Amplify ELA curriculum. And I also want to get a feel for just those of you that are here, kind of your year of implementation. So if this is your first year, just type in 1. If you are new, brand new to Amplify ELA, definitely share that as well. But I definitely want to know kind of what the experience level is in the space with Amplify ELA, because we're going to be able to share our different experiences together today, and our newbies will have some really great insight from those that have already kind of been in this space for quite a bit of time. So please dive in and start sharing that in the chat. Wow. Awesome. So we have some that are new. Oh, wow. So you guys are getting an amazing sneak peek. A lot of first years wanting to learn more. So we'll also maybe kind of hone in on navigation, since I have so many newbies on the call, and that's quite all right as well. So some of the things that we'll talk about today and in our space will be those applications inside of the Amplify ELA curriculum. And for some of these, I'll talk about where you can find them first. And then I'll also give you just a preview of those applications themselves by grade level. So there are going to be some universal applications, but there will also be some amazing moments on where you can actually find those applications. If you have access, whether you have demo access, you have pilot access, or you have your full access, I highly recommend taking a moment to actually log in to the curriculum if you can, so that as I navigate on my end, you can kind of quickly get to some of the places that I share with you. This is recorded, so you can come back to it at any point when you do get access, but this is just another place where you're allowed to practice, right? And we can do that right here on the spot. The first thing I'm going to share with you once I start sharing my screen is just that about when we think about engagement for our students and the time that we spend as teachers and educators on trying to find the just right topic or engaging file or information for our students, it can be very time consuming, right? So where do we find those engagement pieces? Well, luckily you are with Amplify ELA. So I'll get to show you where those live in the curriculum. I do have multiple monitors, so you will see me look from side to side because I'm looking at my additional monitor. And I also want to ensure that I get to see what's happening on the chat. So let's dive in to where we can actually find this information first. I'll start by sharing this quick little clip and video while some of you are still getting logged into the curriculum on where you can actually find some of this, okay? All right, so here I am, I'm logged into the curriculum. And what I've done here is just created a quick space to talk about where do you find these interactive multimodal applications as well as experiences, because that's what we want to provide for our students. Applications in Amplify ELA, for those of you that are new, here's the really exciting thing. Students don't have to download anything. I know when we think of applications today, we're really thinking about students having to go to a store or a location to download these things. Everything luckily lives in the Amplify ELA platform and space already. So that's where it gets really just great on our end. So here's what it looks like on the platform. Here's where you will find your resources. The first location is in the top left corner. That's called the global navigation. And once you click on that, a side panel opens up. And inside of the global navigation, that's where you will see ELA apps. So many of the applications, 6th through 8th grade, will live here. As a teacher, if I only teach 7th grade, for example, I may only see my 7th grade applications. Here you can see I'm clicking and I'm actually going into 6B mysteries and investigations. And what I've done at this moment is on my unit page where I can see my subunits, there's a little button that says jump down where I'm planning for my unit. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade have these options, but the key is there's a little section that says apps in this unit. And I chose 6B because there are tons in this space. In 6B, you'll notice that there are 3 and actually 4. There's an additional app that we'll talk about, but there's the evidence app, there is the caught red-handed app, and the scene of the crime. So this is just me kind of replaying how I got to those spaces. I click the global navigation. I can see some of my ELA apps there. If I don't see them in that space, it's okay. I know that each unit will also call out and let me know where those apps are. And the key is going to be, when am I utilizing those applications as well? So you can see that when I click apps in this unit, those applications are evident, but also the lessons in which they're going to appear. I'm planning for my units. I have those indicators as well as those reminders. So I'll take a moment to pause so that those of you that are navigating, maybe you have some time to kind of click through and notice that you do have an apps in this unit tab. We will go through where all of the apps live, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then I will also share, like I said, where some hidden gems live. Now, I know I do have some newbies. However, whether you are piloting, you're new, you have had some experiences with Amplify ELA. So I don't want you to discount yourself. I want you to share in the chat share an app or a quest that you've used with your students or you've played around with. And I want you to include a rating for each of these. So I want you to pretty much decide, what is that app or Quest that I've used. For some of you, it may be that very familiar, the Telltale Heart app, the Telltale Art app, or the Who Killed Edgar Allan Poe Quest. For others, you may have dived into some specific to your grade level. And so I want you to really dive in and rate for each of these: engagement, development of individual understanding for students. How did that really help students develop their individual understanding? And how did that provide students with visual support? So take a moment to think through those. And then I also want to just share an example in the chat. This is what it will look like if you're working in the space of the chat. Let's see if we can get this back up here. Just a moment. Okay, let's try sharing one more time. There we go. All right. When we think about the apps and the applications, I listed these 3 categories because we want these items to be engaging for our students. But many of the times we also want to create opportunities for students to develop their own individual understanding and thinking. This also centers around, how are my students transferring the information we may have collected together as a group on their own? What is their understanding of the text? How are they representing and sharing that information? And then what are the visual supports? So does that mean my student is storyboarding? What are the supports embedded in those applications for my students? So we're going to start with some universal apps and experiences that you may or may not have known of. The first are things like the vocab app, mobile solos, and the Spotlight app. These 3 sections are actually series or moments that are being used grades 6, 7, and 8. The vocab app for the teacher is really exciting because there's just so much data that we can receive on how our students are doing with their vocabulary development. From a student perspective, it's fun. It's a digital space. They're going to encounter words in a variety of situations, but multiple times. And when we move into the mobile solos, we'll talk more about mobile solos, but these were designed to give students another opportunity to work independently. Solos are designed for independent work, often as homework. And we wanted to provide those opportunities when students don't have technology at home. Most of them may have access to a smartphone. So we'll look into mobile solos and how those are really benefiting students and what students are able to do with those. And Spotlight. I love the Spotlight app because I feel as if it's really great in the very beginning portions of the curriculum. When you start, we give you tons of reminders and cues to use the Spotlight app, but the Spotlight app is really great even when you don't have those cues and reminders. They're great pieces to come back to. You're creating these exemplars for your class, and they're also really powerful experiences for students to see when you talk about your spotlights at the beginning of the year and you kind of come back to those at the end of the year. So spotlights are just some really powerful moments to highlight examples that are happening in the classroom. Before we dive in, I see some questions in the chat, so I'll dive in and see what those look like. The question is, I would like to know how teachers are motivating their students to engage in their work. I think that's such a great question. And teachers, you can definitely chime into the chat here. I will give you some things that I've worked with some teachers on and what they're sharing in the field. Some of the things that teachers are doing to engage students is student choice. Students are more engaged when they feel as if I have an option in this process. I almost get to choose my own adventure. So we're going to see quite a bit of that, but that does help to motivate them and give them a choice. They don't feel boxed in. The other thing that has really sparked engagement for students is the idea that there isn't a correct or incorrect answer. And I tread lightly on that because yes, there are going to be moments where we don't want students walking out of the room with a completely incorrect view of a text. However, that discovery is going to be really important. When we're working with adolescents, motivating them is a huge key. And they're also going through a lot of psychological changes. They're pretty proud. They're second guessing themselves. And so allowing them a space to know it's okay to not have the correct answer because that's not what we're about. We're about that discovery and having those dialogues and conversations and discussions. Creating that space has been a motivating factor for many, many students. So if you guys have other things to share, please drop those into the chat because I think that's a really powerful question. Diving into the vocab app, here's some things about the vocab app from the student perspective. From the student perspective, with the vocab app, they're going to receive immediate feedback. They can check their stats. It will adapt for students daily. And so as they improve in their vocabulary development, they will receive more challenging words. Mastery in the vocab app is very important, but it's also not something that's easy to attain. When we talk about mastery in the vocab app, that means the student has encountered this word on 3 separate occasions, and those occasions may not happen in the same week. They will not be the same activity, and they've actually answered the question correct every single time. That's what mastery is. When students are mastering words, it is a huge celebration. They get to see their different levels, how many activities they're completing, and so on. From the teacher perspective, here are the things that we get to see happening from the side of the vocab app. One is just the accuracy. Here's my entire class. What does the overall accuracy look like? I can see this from a marking period. I can see and view the accuracy from a week. What does that accuracy look like over the course of the entire year? But I start to really dive into my vocabulary data. Some other things is let's look at a student in particular. Here's Ian. And I can see the words that Ian is currently working on. These are words that he's currently receiving activities for in the vocab app. I can also see what those activities would be. So on the right-hand side, here's a hashtag activity, Guillermo. I can see all of those. I can also see what are the words that he's mastered. So I have a variety of things that I'm viewing in the vocab app. When we move into more data about Ian specifically, what do I notice about the correct activities versus his total activities? What does his performance look like from a day's perspective, a week or a month? I have that kind of overlay of information. And then I start to see I can set a grade or even a stream of support for my student. And these are just three examples of streams here. There are more. There are additional streams in the vocab app. So striving, there's core, and there's challenge. There isn't a placement test in the vocab app. When students enter in, they are going to receive their core vocabulary revealed terms or words first. The teacher can go in prior to students going into the vocab app and setting these streams. Remember, it's adaptive, so it's going to adapt either way. However, I do not want to create a frustration level for some of my students. So if I know, let's say I have an L student, an L emerging, or an L bridging student, I'm just going to go in and set their level day one because I already know that information. I don't want them to get in here and feel frustrated. Other students that I'm not sure, maybe I'll leave them at core or put them at light. I may also have some information from previous teachers, IEPs, that can help me make some of those decisions. But it is adaptive, so you do not have to do that. But that was a great question regarding placement tests for the vocab app. You do not have those because you can set these levels and it is going to adapt for where students are. I highly recommend setting the students stream. If you're not sure, try keeping them in their grade level first before saying, well, I know that I have a 7th grade student that's reading multiple years below grade level. We do have streams in there for our students that are reading below grade level, but we still want to give them those grade level vocabulary terms first. So be very mindful about saying, well, it's a 7th grade student, I'm going to give them 4th grade words, for example. Those are just my little caveats. Great question. Keep those questions coming. Other things happening in the vocab app, the words. What are the words? And so here I can see that I can search for words. What are the words in the vocab app? I'm searching. I can see all of the streams. What is the part of speech? Are these academic, L, striving, or core words? And I could also see what's kind of the challenge, what's the grade band, kind of what's happening with these words. So I have a variety of information coming to me regarding these vocab words. When I do search for a word and I select that word, here's an example of vividly. I can actually see vividly is being used as, of course, as an adverb. Here's the definition, synonyms, antonyms, and then all of the activities in the vocab app associated with the word vividly. I can then select one or all of these to preview. When I preview, I am launching the actual activity in the vocab app. This is very helpful, all my newbies on the call, when you start the year and you have students that, or you just want to demonstrate or demo to your students the vocab app, this is a great kind of whole class. This is what you're going to experience when you go into the vocab app. You can demo this live with your students by just selecting a word and selecting a few activities. I've also seen teachers use this when they're coming across students struggling with a specific vocabulary activity. So is it ordering antonyms? And so maybe the teacher is pulling those out and saying, let's actually look at this together as a class, because these can be teachable moments as well. You have these at your fingertips. Those are the connections that you're making in the vocab app. The next thing we're going to talk about are mobile solos. Mobile solo students access these through the global navigation. As I mentioned, there's actually a tab or a little icon that says mobile solos for students. Once again, just because they're on a smart device doesn't mean they have to download an application. They will go directly through the LMS system that you're using. So whatever that may be, whether it's Clever, Schoology, Google, whatever that login is, when they get into the Amplify platform, they will select mobile solos and they will be able to read. They will have the same rich audio they do in the curriculum in class. They will have access to that on their mobile device. They are highlighting, they're annotating, they're answering the same question types. Just because they're working in their mobile phones doesn't mean we're not going to ask them to do, let's say, a drag and drop, like what you see here. Or What happens when the student comes back to class the next day? Do they have to redo everything? That wouldn't be very engaging for students. So all of this information is automatically transferred to the digital space and platform for them. And the auto scoring is still happening for you as the teacher. If you set a differentiation level for your student, that still applies here when they're working in their mobile solo. So they're still receiving the same level of dedication and support. Questions about mobile solos? I see some really great questions coming in. And so remember, everything, this is all included with Amplify ELA. All of these applications, they just come with Amplify ELA. It's really important that we support teachers and we support students with having these experiences to enhance their visual supports, create those individual opportunities. So they get the mobile solos. Some other questions that I'm seeing. Can you aggregate the data to see who or which students are struggling with, for example, antonyms in the vocab app? Excellent question. Some things that you can do in the vocab app is you can start to sort. I will dive in to analyze whether or not you can start to actually pull out, because you do have a class view, but I'll look into it, Hope, and let you know a definitive yes or what the progress is on that. Excellent question. All right, so we talked about the vocab app, mobile solos, Spotlight. So remember, you're going to receive a lot of instruction on how to use Spotlight when you start the curriculum, because students are going to do a lot of writing, they're writing throughout, but we start to build that writing muscle very early on. And so in the Spotlight app, what you're doing is you're creating a visual wall of exemplars. And this one is one that I created called Focusing on a Moment. And this is for my 7th grade class. And so I actually pulled these exemplars from student work. It's called Spotlight because I can actually anonymize this or make this anonymous, or I can put the student's name up. And then you click on these little lights and it's a spotlight. How to create a spotlight. Because this is recorded, I will show you so you can come back and look at exactly how to do this. Here we are in the curriculum itself. I always have tons of tabs open, so I'll try to isolate just this one. I'm going into my global navigation and I'm going to Spotlight, which is directly under Tools. Once I'm in my Spotlight space, I can see I have one here, but I actually want to create a new wall. So I'm building this wall. Which class? Don't worry, no one should have as many classes as I do. And so I'm going to build this one for 8th grade, and the name of this wall will be for my Liberty and Equality unit. Once I create the wall, now it's just time for me to copy and paste the excerpts here. Where am I getting these? Remember that your students are going to be doing amazing work. They're going to answer constructed response or short answer questions, and these are automatically going into your classwork. So you can pull those exemplars. You're copying and pasting directly from classwork into this space, or you can feel free to type them into this space. I'll just do a test. When I do that, I can select the student, as I mentioned, or I can make it anonymous. And then what is the skill that I actually want to tag into this space? So here are just a few things that I can really start to prepare for conversations with my students. This is the Spotlight portion in space. And I save that and I have my Spotlight app. I can always edit my wall and come back to it. Remember, it's called Spotlight because I can actually create a light and expand this out to share with the entire class. Keep the questions coming. I always welcome them. So if there are other questions, do not hesitate to type them into the chat. We talked about the universal apps. So now I want to transition us into talking about some of the other apps. In 6th grade, we saw some examples of these. One, for example, in 6th grade is the Evidence app. But I'll pause and see, are there any questions? Great questions. I see some questions around kind of pairings with Google Classroom and that type of integration. Yes, when you're in the curriculum, I'll just quickly jump back over here. You will notice if you select into any of these spaces, and I'll go into a lesson, I have my assign in Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams if you're on. We also have that feature. So these do pair well. It will direct students right back into the platform. So I go back to making sure that teachers don't have to duplicate things. Now that we are going to talk about 6th grade, 6th grade apps, let's start with the Evidence app. In 6th grade, you have something that I absolutely love called the Evidence app. I really like the Evidence app because we just think about 6th graders overall. When I taught 6th graders, they are still elementary. So whether you're at a K-6 building, you're at a 6-8 building, dare I say, you're at a 6-12 building, they are still the same. And they want to know, do I have it right? And 6th graders more than 7th or 8th graders, they will run up to you and say, is this correct? Do I have it right? Can you check it? So many times. So I love the Evidence app because it builds their independence and their confidence. They get to have that visual representation. Here, when students are learning about the yellow fever, pandemic or epidemic, the epidemic, what will happen is they're going to collect the evidence themselves. They're going to do this work. And so here's an example of what's happening in the Evidence app. So the student is going to select their evidence. They're going to select whether or not the evidence is opposing or supporting evidence. And this is directly from the text. What happened prior to this is we actually did some lessons on what does it mean to assess evidence. So this isn't a surprise. We've scaffolded to this point. And now the student will make some determinations. How factual is this evidence? Rate the credibility, as well as rate the relevance of that evidence for students. It's fun because notice the visual representation that starts to happen here. This also means my student that loves to have that regular back and forth of, is this correct? Look at your visual representation. What do you think? And that ownership starts to come back in. So this is students using the Evidence app in grade 6. In that same unit in 6B, they're going to then use the Caught Red-Handed app. This is allowing students to understand, they're diving into Sherlock Holmes, and we want them to understand the red herrings they will write about in their final essay. Remember, students write a lot. How do we help them transfer a lot of that information they're gathering into their writing? So with the Caught Red-Handed app, this is really them considering how details in the beginning of the story end up having a very different meaning or pretty much none at all by the end. So they have tons of resources in the Caught Red-Handed app. My other favorite, because if you're a mystery person like myself, more on Sherlock Holmes, Scene of the Crime. What I really enjoy about the Scene of the Crime app is intentionally, we're asking teachers to let students make mistakes. This app is designed to be covered over multiple days because the first day, we actually want students to place furniture, let's say in locations that are clearly not indicated in the text. Just place the furniture where you think it should go, for example. And then when they come back, they have to attach textual excerpts to their choices, and they'll have opportunities to make adjustments. Something else that's really happening is how many times do we have to say very often, where's your text evidence? Where did you find that in the text? Here, it's happening almost organically because you were able to have a great time, decorating this room. Now spend some time actually finding the evidence to support your placement of the furniture and their locations. And the other reminder is you are not Sherlock Holmes in this space. So we go back to that engagement of, I'm not feeling the pressure of I have to have the correct answer. It's still engaging, it's still fun, and I'm getting to explore and dive into the text as well. So adding those multiple layers. So those are some things happening in 6th grade. Now I did say apps and experiences. So those are the 6th grade apps. The 6th grade experience is actually the Quest Myth World. So Myth World, the Quest is actually in the Greeks unit. And here's just a quick snippet of the introduction of the Myth World Quest. What has happened? It's very melodious, right? Okay, so that is just a snippet. It's a longer introduction, but what actually happened in Myth World itself is that Medusa has turned everyone in Greece to stone, and it's up to the students to break the characters out of stone and defeat Medusa. So we give students tons of background information around what Perseus did to actually defeat Medusa, the materials that he needed, and how they're going to support their teacher by actually finding all of the items to defeat Medusa. The other thing that's really exciting about the Myth World Quest is that when students actually complete this, they do have a writing assignment, and we're going back to, they get to choose which path they want to complete. So it's still going into that engagement, choosing their own adventure. It's an extension of what they have learned in the Greeks unit, and it's also built around just that engagement for students. Questions about 6th grade apps and experiences? Okay, 7th grade, I know you have been waiting very patiently. So let's talk about what's happening at 7th grade. So on the left, you can see the apps. On the right of your screen are the experiences. 7th grade, you have the Hopometer that is in the 7A unit around the Red Scarf Girl subunit. And then you also have the Telltale Art app. So we'll dive into that nugget as well. And then there are 3 quests with a variety of options happening in 7th grade. So we'll talk about and dive into each of these. We'll start with the Hopometer. Students are actually learning about Zhili Zhang's life. She's about 12 years old during the time of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. And so they're going to graph her hopefulness throughout her memoir, Red Scarf Girl. Notice the text that you have here. Students are going to come back to this at multiple touch points. And then here are the story points where they're mapping and graphing how hopeful she is. This is powerful on its own, but it really resonates when students are able to get together in groups and have conversations about their points, especially when they can find someone who has very opposing views on how hopeful Zhili is at a moment in time. So when students get together, let's say, and there's a student in moment C that says, well, I think she's a 4, and another student says, I think she's a 9. This sparks great discussion and conversation for students. But notice we're not saying these are actually the correct hopeful points for Zhili. students are making their own interpretations. They're using the text as evidence to support why they feel that she's either hopeful or hopeless. When students encounter the Telltale Art app, they are reading like movie directors and analyzing and understanding the narrator's perspective in the Telltale Heart. The Telltale Heart does include a very unreliable narrator. However, we want students to understand the narrator's perspective, so they will storyboard. This is also really helpful for students who may just feel defeated around having to draw something overall. So they will do this for the narrator's perspective. The other thing about the apps is we want this to happen over the course, if you haven't noticed, over the course of days or lessons, not just we're only going to use this app for a day, because we want to allow students an opportunity to process what they've done. So one day they're going to actually analyze and storyboard the narrator's perspective. The next day it's going to be the reader's perspective, intentionally done at separate times so that they can process. And when they get to comparing the narrator's perspective and the reader's perspective, they actually have an opportunity to see what's going on, why aren't things matching, and so on. So those are the applications already embedded into the lessons and the curriculum. The Quest experiences that you will notice, one is Black, White, and Blues in Chicago. And this is an immersive experience, just like the Greeks or the other quests that we'll talk about. And this really allows students to explore the lives of the characters in Lorraine Hansberry's play, A Raisin in the Sun. We really want students to be able to gain a greater knowledge of African-American history, the emphasis on the civil rights era, thinkers, ideas. And so in this quest, students really get to explore just the community of Southside Chicago during that time period. We think about primary sources and historical moments, not just in 6th, 7th, or even 8th grade. We think about how do we allow students to really engage in those moments. And here they were reading this play, so now they get to see scenes that the characters in the play might have encountered during that time period. The other thing about this quest is we see a lot of the digital happening with the apps. This one is specifically designed to be printed. So the images will be online, but there are a lot of print components. So when we think about and we hear of students just having that burnout or just needing some space from screen time, this is another really great opportunity for students to really dive in to historical pieces and still interact with pen and paper. The other quest is Perception Academy. And if you were with us last week, we actually took a bit of Perception Academy and talked about it when we were talking about Mrs. B, because the Perception Academy quest, it takes students through a series of linked activities that actually focus on brain disorders and how they affect what we perceive and how we respond to the world around us. So there's an introduction, and then students will actually choose to be a character. They're going to move throughout the day, but their perception is actually going to match one of the characters or the disorders, if you will, in Oliver Sacks's book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. So if you know about Mrs. B, she did have frontal lobe damage, and so students their day will be perceived in that manner. So that is Perception Academy. And then the last one in 7th grade will be the Who Killed Edgar Allan Poe quest. And for all of you that love a good murder mystery, this is it. Students have a detective notebook. There are dossiers of different characters. One of my favorite is the fact that Mark Twain is in there because that was his, real life writing rival. And another place and space where students are really gaining information outside of what they were reading in the unit. How do we extend? A lot of times we're thinking, how do we extend the learning experience? And we've thought about that as well. And we've thought about that throughout those Quest experiences. So that's 7th grade. I do have a bonus coming up right after 8th grade, because I do want to share this little nugget that not many people know about, but it is one of my favorites. So I'll show you exactly where to find it. 8th grade, I did not forget about you, but I want to pause and see if there are any questions. We've covered quite a bit of apps, experiences, but are there questions or things that you're noticing, or even trends that you may see throughout the grade levels that you want to share? All right, 8th grade, here is where your amazing experience lies. You have the Emancipation Project. So there are a few things that we started to transition and think about in 8th grade. We know that this is the big kind of leap for many of our students. They're, if we're at a 6-8 building or even a K-8, they're officially kind of getting into the upper grades, high school. So the Emancipation Project is another great experience for students around primary and secondary source images, documents. This accompanies our collection units. And if you join us for our next session, we're really going to dive in to research units. But the Emancipation Project provides another print experience. There are a lot of visuals happening throughout the other units, but we wanted to start to transition our students. And so that's what you'll see and notice with the Emancipation Project Quest. Okay, here's my question, and then the bonus. Type your response in the chat. Which app or quest are you most excited about trying with your students? I know I also have a lot of district leads, so which ones are you excited about telling your teachers about? Go ahead and type in the chat which app or quest. We've covered quite a bit. We've covered them all. So which ones are you most excited about trying? And I hope I've even added some clarity for those of you that are newbies to a lot of the resources that you have available coming to you in Amplify ELA. So I see the vocab app is in there. I know the vocab is just truly a fun place. I go in there and play around with the different ones myself. Some other ones. I think 3 cheers for the vocab app. Okay, so we're going to get to the bonus. This is actually located in the Amplify library. And those of you that I have either met virtually or in person, you know that this is my very happy place. So let's go to the library and I will show you where to find archive units. And I call them archive units, but they're archives, okay? To get to my library in the upper left corner, remember that's my global nav. Under tools, I have my library. And these are truly hidden gems, okay? To find my archives, I go to my search bar and I will type archive. And here you'll notice there are many archives. African-American women writers, body snatchers, Cesar Chavez, Chinese Cultural Revolution. There are many archives. When you select an archive, here's a pro tip, everyone. I want you to click favorite this book, because you too have the ability to actually create your lists. And under my library, you select favorites, and this is where all of your archives will live, so you can see them all in one place. Back to the archives. let's say one of my really favorite units, of course I have many, and since we're talking about it, is the one about Phineas Gage. So many questions I always think about there. But the Body Snatchers archive provides information about the practice of stealing bodies from graveyards to sell to medical schools. Now we know that Phineas Gage's skull was used for research and science moving forward, and that's why we can see it in the textbooks today. But when we click start reading, research questions are already done. Every single one of these archives already have research questions. These are also great social studies add-ons already here. Majority of them are tied to the units that we're already doing, or there's some connection. And then I have excerpts, I have images. I can just click through from page to page. I can even assign different ones to students. I can add notes, but I always like to say the archives. Here's an image. And I think that this is also a time saver for many of us. Where can I find an image that depicts this? It's already there. It's in the archives, everyone. So in my happy place and space, let's treasure the archives. So remember to search, you type in archive, and then you favorite every single one of them so that you can quickly access all of the archives. You want more Edgar Allan Poe? There's an archive. Emily Dickinson, say yes. There's an archive, Harriet Tubman, Navajo Code Talkers. We could definitely spend quite a bit of time here in this space, but there are tons of archives, and every single one of these, like I said, have research questions. And that means sky's the limit on what we can do with those, having students work in groups, individually. There's tons of space and opportunities with those archives. So that brings us to our time together. If you would like to download our ebook that we discussed, or just in general, 6 habits your middle school students can build now for high school success, the link is in the chat. The other thing to note is that our upcoming session is March 24th, and this one, we are diving into research skills. We're going to really hone into those collection units, research skills for students. What are the skills that they need? How do we ensure that? And how do we prepare to utilize them now and in the future? So we started with that look into high school. We're definitely going to end our last session with the same view. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And for those of you that would love to know more about Amplify ELA, please go ahead and visit literacy.amplify.com/ELA/. Thank you everyone so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure. Have a great day, everyone.